be honest, that doesn't sound less complicated. Mm-hmm. Know that feeling. My mom. My mom is the first person in chat, and she just types her own name. Like the message is just her name. Oh, you can delete your own message. Interesting. What a world. Look at
Hello, everybody. Welcome into the broadcast. How are we feeling? How are you feeling? How is everybody doing today? I just want y'all to know that this has been a bit of an interesting time coming, and we have decided that we wanted to make a Marvel broadcast. We wanted to make a Marvel podcast because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So welcome in. This is a hot Marvel minute, but this is also the NoobMasters podcast. I'm Spaceman, joined by the wonderful, the only. Introduce yourself here at WavePunk. Talk to us about who you are. Let us know.
How's it going? My name's WavePunk. I'm a professional nerd. They pay me to talk about video games. Spaceman is also a professional nerd.
That's true. Yeah.
And I've been loving the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever since it became a thing. It's a fun story. And we can get into that in a little bit. But yeah, as someone who loves world building and loves storytelling, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is something that I've really fascinated on and has become more and more a part of discussing with people. And so yeah, this when I found out that among a few others, Spaceman, you were one of the people who was very I gotta mute the stream. The delay is surprising.
We'll get that. We'll get that.
We'll figure it out.
We'll get that. We'll get that.
We'll figure out the delay at some other point. This is episode number 1. But yeah, no, I was like, oh, we gotta do a podcast, man. Let's just have fun. Let's see what happens. So here we are. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's this is only episode 1. Of course, we're gonna hope to get it bigger and better, for the future. But when I think we kind of found out, it was like we were kind of skating around, knowing that we both liked this specific aspect of Nerd Kingdom, and then when we were able to meet up a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, right? We were like, we should just talk about this stuff, because it's basically what a lot of our Twitter consumption has become, and a lot of what I'm sure a lot of viewers' consumption of YouTube and Twitter lately has been keeping up with the Marvel shows and keeping up with the new trailers that have been dropping. So this is just going to be a space where we talk about whether it's a trailer that's come out or interesting news in the MCU, Marvel related, if not whatever video games are interesting as well. But also the shows are important. So the shows are a lot of what we're going to be recapping, because if you haven't been keeping up with What If, that is a huge part of this discussion, and it's going to be a huge part of the conversation today. But to kind of start, we just wanted to talk about who we are, how we got introduced to Marvel, and more importantly, how it's kind of brought us to this point, because we had an interesting discussion last night. But Wave, talk to me about your introduction to the MCU, how you found yourself here, and then, how you approach different, movies and stuff like that comes out.
I'm gonna move my camera up here just a little bit like that. This feels better. The first thing I ever when I go back in my brain through everything I've experienced in life and say, what was the first time I encountered Marvel as an intellectual property? The first video games, actually, weirdly enough, is actually kind of like my touching point. I had played very few video games growing up. I'm talking ages 7 and under. I'd been around them, but every time I'd seen them, they were the holy grail. I wanted to experience them, but I didn't have a touching point. And I had a friend that had a PlayStation 1, and one of the games he had was the Amazing Spider-Man game for the PlayStation 1. And I was like, this game's great. This is so much fun. This is crazy. And it was just a video game to me at that point. It didn't matter what the game was. It was just, as long as it was a good game, I wanted to play it. And then I eventually got a PlayStation 1, and that was one of the first games I got to play. And one of the first games I played through, and it was those characters. Venom was this hilarious concept, which
good. Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I don't know, the way that he's such a different character compared to the majority of characters, right? He's not a good guy, not a bad guy. He's two people. He's one. There's so many things that make him a unique character, but he was one of the first points of I really enjoy the tongue-in-cheek nature that Marvel approaches itself, the self-referential. We're not taking ourselves too seriously, but we're going to tell some really dang good stories in the process.
Right.
So I was really excited, and I really enjoyed that game. That was the first point. And then it's weird. I don't remember really how I got into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I just remember going to see Captain America in theaters, and I think I watched Iron Man at home. And then Iron Man 2 came out. I think we watched that at home as well. And then Thor, I think I saw Thor in theaters. And then it became just every few months there was another one. And it was sure, let's go. I was new to having a car and to having cash that I could spend on things. There was a theater by my house, and on Tuesdays had $2 tickets. So I would go. It was a terrible theater, but the screen and the sound system was good. Everything else was horrible, right? $2 though. $2.
Screw it,
you can't say no to $2. They were trying to get you in to buy the hot dogs, and I was like, no, I'm not buying hot dogs. I'm just here to watch a movie for $2. Thank you very much. And so I went to that, and that was where I would watch all the films. I would just, every time one would come out, I go spend $2 and watch the film. And it became this, like, I know the story as things progressed. When I saw Avengers, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is a new experience. I went in with no expectations because I wasn't a traditional Marvel fan. I wasn't sitting there when they found out we're gonna make Marvel movies. The way that, like, if they make a Halo movie, right? I go in there with expectations. I go in there with like preconceived notions of what needs to happen. I was not that fan for Marvel. I was just, oh, this is a cool story. Yeah, I was almost this kind of oblivious way of approaching it. And then over 10 years of watching these films, you realize by the time Infinity War rolled around, I'm invested in this. And my Infinity War was like, they came around my birthday. It came out on like April 27th. My birthday is April 29th. So my party, the thing I did for my birthday, both for Infinity War and Endgame, was going to see that movie on like opening night. Infinity War was in like a huge theater in downtown Burbank here in Los Angeles. They got crazy theaters, and it was packed with Marvel nerds. Great viewing experience. My mom was there. A whole bunch of my friends were there, and it's interesting to think about. Like, it started off with, how cheaply can I pay for this movie that I don't really care about, and it ended with, this is how I want to celebrate the one day that's actually about me every year. You know, so like it was just this growth and progression, and now here we are. It's a great universe. I'm loving the way that the next phase is starting to unfold, and yeah, I'm really excited to keep talking about it.
Dude, I feel like we could have a whole podcast on just like our approach to some of the movies we've been to, because the whole breakdown of how you found out for Infinity War, how you kind of went to it and you were like, okay, I want to do this for my celebration, and how we're gonna approach it. Like, that is, I feel like, what a lot of people went through. And then, yeah, you're totally right. Like, within the past, I want to say, like, within the past 5-6 years, it's really become, mainstream, sure, but like Marvel has become like events that you have to get caught up with. It's like, oh, if you didn't see it, you're immediately behind socially in the conversation. And so that was like, Infinity War was that thing. Like, dude, like, I'm like, you used to pay $8, maybe $10 for a ticket. Now I'm waking up at 6 o'clock checking sites, seeing like, okay, I'm spending $300 if I don't care, like, we're getting in. So, dude, it's like this crazy journey from PlayStation 1 Spider-Man, which, Venom was hilarious. If you never played it, if you've never played that original Spider-Man game, which I think it's like top 5, one of the best, just go watch someone on YouTube like speedrun it. The commentary in that is comedy. Venom is like the standout. It's just like, it kind of set the stage for what a lot of people would use as their entry point. But yeah, I feel like there is this kind of gray period when we started with Marvel, which was very much the Sam Raimi trilogy, right? We had the 3 really great movies. I mean, number 3 was okay, but you talk about like the first 2 movies, what it did for superhero films, and Spider-Man 2 still holding up to be one of the best individual superhero movies to this day. And a lot of people at the time, superhero movies weren't that huge, but like the people who respected him, Spider-Man 2 was great. Don't do this. No, the Sam Raimi was still with Doc Ock. We're talking about the original. Yeah, the original Spider-Man 2. That, it's, even at that time, you were talking about things like Ghost Rider, which kind of flopped. You had the X-Men for a while, which now we'll get into this discussion about the fact that multiverse exists. Will Hugh Jackman return at some point? But it's like superhero movies, they attempted the franchise model. They attempted just going one after another. It didn't really work. And then there was this gray period. And then, a lot like what you said, which I fell into, was like, oh, okay, like Iron Man's coming out. Oh, I remember it. I was like, this will be interesting. Me and my dad were like, hey, this is a chance for them to make something new with a character that no one cares about. And then it's, oh, another movie came out. Oh, another one. And then I think by the time we had gotten to Captain America, people were like, are they building for like an actual team up? And it just blew up. We're like, is this possible? Can this happen?
I think that's part of what made Marvel so magical with the MCU, is that for the casual fans who just kind of enjoyed superhero content, right? I watched all the Spider-Man movies. It was like, oh, this is fun. I like Spider-Man. He's a kid from, who's just struggling to get by and wants this girl to like him, and he's thinking about buying a car, but he can't afford a car, and like, and then he has superpowers on top of that. Like, that's super relatable versus something like Superman is a classic example of just the most unrelatable character for me. Like, there's nothing. He and I have nothing in common. What am I supposed to hold on to, right? Spider-Man was that touching point. Tobey Maguire was that, like, I was at that age where nothing was like, I didn't take anything. I didn't come in with any expectations, right? I came in just being like, oh, I'm just a kid. I just want to watch a movie. And I was like, oh, that was great, right? I didn't even take the thought of like, no, that movie could have been better, right? As a kid, you just watch things. And you're just like, oh, that was fun. And so Spider-Man came out, and then there was there was Batman movies. There was just superhero content was a thing. The idea of them all being connected wasn't a thing in my mind yet. So the way I consumed it was so organic that it was oh, this is great. Oh, this is so much fun, and I'm excited for it. Right? It's which you can talk about like the way that like DC tried to copy it, and why I think that part of why DC didn't work as well for me was because there was this expectation. I'd watched Marvel do it. Now I'm expecting DC to do it as well. And they're just not getting that same blank slate that Marvel got, but that's an entirely separate conversation. I think that the way that like the Spider-Man movies in particular, I think kind of like set me up for like this, like, oh, this is just going to be one film and then another film and another film, and then they were connected, and that was so cool.
Yeah, like when right around 2008, it was a time when we had passed the era of, I want to call it, like, if we're gonna like use, I guess we use like the comic tiles. We we had the golden age, the silver age, golden age, bronze age, and then there's been debate about what you call like the 2000s. People have said call it the chrome age, call it the hollow age, because of just how. But like, it felt like we ended kind of like this silver age of superhero movies with Ghost Rider, X-Men, the old Batmans, Fantastic Four, which was a thing then. Like, we kind of transitioned, Spider-Man, we transitioned from that to like, oh, like studios were like, hey, maybe we can really like make this not only just a superhero movie, but like, you look at The Dark Knight, they're like, maybe we can make this an actual film, something that people will like enjoy watching, that has elements of superheroes in it. And then we slowly just started moving down the ladder of like, okay, Dark Knight was really good and really dark, and it had an adult theme for a Batman novel. Who would have thought? Let's now take that approach. But Marvel's whole challenge was, how do we bring people into characters that nobody cares about, and how do we make someone like Iron Man mature enough to be like invested in? And then it was just, they started putting these movies together, and they were like, halfway through Captain America, you're like, are they really going to pull this off? Are we? People were freaking out for an Avengers movie. We're like, there's no way they're going to have Avengers in one movie. That can't happen. That's impossible. So it's just it's kind of mind blowing how we got to this point, Wave. I just, looking back,
Yeah, and I think a good kind of topic, I don't know, for the first episode of a new superhero podcast is just the idea that, like, why do we like superheroes so much? They're absurd. They're absurd concepts. The thing about the phrase or the word Spider-Man, like, what a dumb name. Like, what is he? Well, he's a man, but he's also a spider. He's the Spider-Man. Like you take the word out of context, and it's so weird. And then you're like, he wears tights, and he just spends all of his free time just moving around the city, like just looking for crime to fight. Like, it's such a weird concept, yet for some reason it's so relatable. It's so easy to just like take at face value and say like, oh, I'm gonna enjoy watching this. And it was weird to me the first time I ran into a friend who was like, I'm just not into superheroes, and I was like, and it made me like stop and like kind of look out and like step outside the bubble and go, why am I into superheroes? And I'm gonna be honest, I still kind of don't know the answer to the question. It's just I don't know, they're easy to cheer for. I really don't have a good answer for that. Do you have a good answer for why you're into superheroes?
No, the concept isn't, like, it's insane. I think a lot of us are interested in the idea of like, what would we do if we were in that position, which if you look at the shows that have tackled that concept, I think The Boys is a great example, right? Like, they have tackled the idea of what would happen if they're real, but like, if you just randomly had powers, how would you react to that? And I think that the movies that did it best are things like Dark Knight, Logan, Spider-Man 2, where they're like, hey, these people have real issues. Like Tobey Maguire or Peter Parker, anxiety, depression. The dude is going through it, and it's affecting how he's able to do what he's supposed to do. Like, the best superhero movies are the ones that really humanize the characters, and that's why we're attached to it. Because I heard this great quote, and I've used it to this day, where DC is all about superheroes struggling to be people, and Marvel is all about people struggling to be superheroes. And I think that is 100% true, because Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Natasha, they're all struggling to be greater than themselves. And in DC, which again could be a whole nother podcast about what they need to do correctly with their own movies, like, that's why it's hard to relate to them. How do you relate to someone who's Superman, who literally is just a god? How do you relate to Batman, who's brooding over one issue for 50 years? It's impossible. But to this day, like, when people say I'm not into superheroes, it's like saying you're not into sports. You're like, wait a minute, what? Like, you don't like the movies? You don't watch the movies?
there's a human element to it.
Yeah.
Like that's just to sports in general. You say you're not into sports. It's like, I understand you maybe not being into American football or not being into NASCAR or not being into baseball, something like that. But like there is something about sports at its core that I think relates to all humans at their core, and you just need to find that in for you. I remember watching a video of a guy talking about how he's like, I never cared about sports, and then I watched this video of the top 10 gaming moments, and there was this fighting game moment, and then I got into Super Smash Brothers from that, and like 6 months later, I'm just going off to anybody who will listen to me about Hungry Box reverse sweeping Armada at Evo, and I realized, wait, I'm a sports fan. And it was like, it wasn't that he didn't like sports, or it wasn't that he didn't like the core thing of sport. He didn't like the aesthetic of sports. He just needed that in for himself. And I think superheroes is kind of another one of those things for people. And for some, yeah, the boys will be a very relatable story that they really appreciate and they really enjoy. And for some, I think that like what DC does right is when they embrace the gods amongst men mentality, right? And they say like, let's build that story. Let's talk about a pantheon and how they relate to these puny humans rather than trying to copy the Marvel format, which was I think the initial mistake they made, right? So once they embrace that, I think that DC is really going to take off and be its own thing and have its own niche. And it's going to be great. But yeah, I talked a lot about how I got into Marvel. I want to hear how you got into Marvel.
Oh man, it's kind of a similar format. Like when I remember playing the original Spider-Man 1 on PC, like I didn't have a PlayStation at the time, so I found it at a Scholastic book fair. I went after school and got it at a Scholastic book fair, picked it up, took it home, and I was like, all right, we're playing this. So that was like my first, I think that was like the first superhero game I played. And then, you had like the Hulk for Game Boy, but I was like, video games, hell yeah. 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, hell yeah, let's play it. I love it.
Wait. So just to be clear, this is the same game. We're talking about the same game, the Amazing Spider-Man game where they spread the poison around the floor.
The city is like all fogged out and you have to swing above it, and then Venom gets introduced and you have to like take pictures for J. Jonah, and Scorpion shows up. You're like, oh my god, what do we do? Then Daredevil's in it for like 30 seconds and it's really random.
Can we talk about for just a second how good of a touch, like a touchstone, specifically that game is for the current MCU, right?
Yes.
Because you have Spider-Man, Venom, Carnage, Captain America, like the Mysterio. You get introduced to so many characters that are supposed to kind of be the niche out there characters as the Marvel universe goes, and you go, oh, I know this guy. Oh, I know that guy, right? You don't get introduced to Iron Man, but Iron Man's kind of the touchstone for the MCU. So you get introduced to that character at the beginning, and then as the MCU expands, there's more and more characters that you're like, oh, I know who these are. And like it's so weirdly happenstance how good of a game that is for what we got with the MCU.
Yeah, no, it is. And like, I have my own, I like Venom currently, the Sony iteration. I still have my own kind of hopes that maybe they'll change certain things, but like that game specifically was, I think it's, I mean, in terms of story, I think it's up there with the Spider-Man PS4 game. I think those are the best too, but that original story was just, it was so perfect. It was like the best version of like 80s and 90s campy Spider-Man with a great, just fun game to play because of all the villains that were introduced. And then Venom is the standout. There's no question. If you've never played or seen it, just go watch it. Venom is hilarious. But yeah, between that and reading comics here and now as a kid, my dad had a collection of like really old stuff like Shang-Chi, Doctor Strange. He liked a lot of that. But when I was reading, like I remember the first real comic I read was The Dark Knight Returns, or The Dark Knight by Frank Miller. And like, that's something you give to a kid. So I read that. I was like, wow, this is incredibly graphic but awesome. And then from there it was just it was a little bit of comic stuff. But yeah, I think that it's weird. There's like this blur period because I think everybody grew up with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Everybody grew up with the Ang Lee Hulk movie, whether it was good or not. I was a kid. I didn't care. I just saw Big Green Hulk running around. I was like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. That from there transitioned to being young and realizing, oh, Iron Man's coming out. And it's like at that point, I was always a nerd. I was always a comic kid. I was always somebody who liked superheroes. But at that point, it's like Marvel just completely like blinded the peripherals, and it was just focused on, oh my god, here comes the MCU, and just constant from when it came out in 2008. So I was 11 when that movie came out, and from 11 to now it's just been one long continuation of following the MCU. So it's like, I feel like everyone's either always just kind of a nerd kid enjoying comics, and then the MCU came along, or if you came along when the MCU came out, you're a Marvel fan. You came at the time when it happened. So it's just been, it's weird to think that it's been 12 years. Caleb, it's been 12 years.
It is weird to think about that. And it's actually really interesting because I would always go to movies with friends. It was always a social thing for me. I always find at least one friend to go with me and spend the $2 to go see a movie.
Yeah.
And when I went to Infinity War,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a big deal. It was this like huge experience with so many friends. And then when Endgame came out, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to, like, for my birthday, go and celebrate that with friends, but I could tell by the way things were just happening in like my friends' lives at that time, I was gonna struggle to get them all to go to the movie with me. And I decided I'm gonna go watch this movie by myself, which I had never done before. And I went to this. There was the big theaters was where I saw Infinity War.
You're brave.
And then in downtown Burbank, there's the 16. There's the 6 and there's the 8. There's 3 AMC theaters in downtown Burbank that you can throw a blanket over.
Makes sense.
And the 6 and the 8 are much more intimate, small viewing experiences. The theater I saw Infinity War in had at least 120 seats. The theater I saw Endgame in, I think, had 12 or 24. Wow. So it was like a very small theater.
Wow.
Pretty small screen, pretty small room. But it felt so much more... Looking back, I was like, it was the perfect way to do it. Infinity War is this crazy cacophony of war, and Endgame is it starts in this very sober place with it starting literally in the moments where Infinity War ends. And I was so happy in looking back on it that I went and saw it by myself, because like this was a story I had been living over the last 12 years. And it was really important to me. And it was like, as I was going to the movie, I was like, this is a really important thing for me to go see. And I'm really excited I'm going to see this by myself, because friends are great, but they all have very different experiences, very different relationships to Marvel. And I kind of want to close out this chapter on my own, have that like hour in the car / just going into my room afterwards just to think and not have to say anything to anybody. And it was a really kind of good way to close that out. I was really glad I did it that way.
This is the problem with these kinds of podcasts, because it's just me like, yes, 100%. I feel everything you just said. I mean, Infinity War, when it came out, it was this huge monumental moment, because from there, I mean, I feel like there's that psychological thing of like light bulb memories where you remember specific events, but it's not very structured or tangible. You're like, oh, I remember being here, kind of feeling this. I remember all the Marvel movies that I saw in theaters, because I think I saw every single one except Ragnarok. That's the one I missed, and I had to see that out of theaters. But I went to every single MCU movie in theaters. And then right around, I think, at Age of Ultron, and then past that, right near Civil War, between that gap is when we realized, okay, within the next 3 or 4 years, things are going to ramp up. Like, they're going to get to a specific point, which is Infinity War. And that is when I physically remember, like, okay, now I'm cognitively aware of where we're going, and let's get there. So Infinity War was this massive deal. And if people have never experienced anything like that, I'm sorry, because that build up to Infinity War was like, coming home from university every day, and I would have arguments with my roommates like, dude, this is going to happen. No, this is going to happen. We're going to theorize this is going to happen. And we didn't know. We knew it was going to change things, but we're like, this is a huge movie, like monumental Empire Strikes Back-esque movie that's going to come out for our generation. It happened. I saw it day one, Thursday night, dead center in the theater, with 10 of my friends, literally all in a row, and we were freaking out. And the ride home, we're like, this changes everything. What the hell do we do now? Like, we were invested. We were invested with this movie. We're like, we felt like we were living it. Thanos snapped, and we're like, oh my God, how does this happen? And then, Endgame was just like this really personal experience for a lot of people. Like, I am a huge... Captain America is my favorite character of the MCU, and so like going in, I was focused on what are they gonna do with Steve and how is his journey gonna end. And for my friend, he was Iron Man. He's like, how is Tony's story gonna end? Yeah. Everyone had this personal connection to Endgame, where it's like Infinity War was just screw it, everyone's having fun, sort of, and then Endgame was like everyone's just really depressed on their own character, because it's just sad. Like it's this weird experience that's not tangible that I don't think a lot of people got to experience, which is unfortunate, but it's crazy.
And it is like one of those really special things to have watched it over the course of 10 years versus someone who's like, I want to get into the MCU right now, and they take the 4 months, admittedly, it'll take you to like catch up by watching one a night. There's something about that opening scene of Infinity War when Loki dies. And he's actually dead. You've seen Loki die a bunch of times, but this time you're pretty confident he's actually dead. 2 things happen in that first scene, right? It's Loki dying and then the Hulk getting beat. The 2 things that just don't happen. Like a main character dies and the Hulk losing, right? The Deus Ex Machina showed up at the very beginning and got X'd. So like there's just such like your brain after 10 years of I've watched the same formula, a formula I love, but I've the same formula for 10 years across these movies, and then in the first opening moments, completely different setting, and that difference continued through the whole movie, right? It was such like I can't explain. And the other thing that I think that they did in Infinity War was for 10 years they were making standalone films that if they were telling you a story and it related to another story, they had to kind of give you the context, sort of like an anime episode where they kind of like every time they give you the full backstory on everything. You're like, I saw this episode. I'm binge watching this. Stop showing me the same bits over and over again. But Infinity War was the first film where I felt like they'd said, hey, we've been teaching you this language. We've been teaching you this story for the last 10 years. Now we're just going to speak the language. We're going to we're gonna assume you've seen it, right? In the second opening scene when Banner falls into the sanctum and he's like, who would be able to tell us where what was the character that they're missing? And he turns to Iron Man and said to Tony Stark, it's like, who would be able to find this? And he's like, oh, probably Steve Rogers. And everyone kind of like goes,
yeah, Vision. They're like, where's Vision? Where'd he go?
Vision, like, Vision. That's it. Yeah, they're like, who would be able to hunt down Vision? He's like, probably Steve Rogers, right? And everyone kind of like groans, right, in the scene. And if you haven't seen all the films before that, you don't know what they're talking about. You don't know why is that a bad thing? Who is Steve Rogers, right? Like the dialogue becomes so much more powerful.
Yes.
Because every line, when he said probably Steve Rogers, he's referring to a 2-hour film we watched together. You know, that line has that many memories packed into that one line, and that's every line of the film. It's just it's a great experience. It's a wonderful moment that you kind of had to like grow up with the story the same way we did to, I think, fully experience it. But it is still something that other people can go back and like start over and experience again.
Yeah, some of my favorite things, and again, don't worry, like this is just us introducing kind of our backgrounds, how we got in the MCU, and we're going to transition into talking about the No Way Home trailer that just dropped last week. But to kind of conclude kind of this segment, like there are parts of the MCU, some of my favorite moments are the small dialogue where it's subtle references. It's things that either someone said before, someone is referencing, or character traits that you pick up on that have been referenced in prior movies. So like you talked about, like Strange, where's Steve? Oh, that's a whole movie you'd have to go figure out of why Steve's not here, or just picking up small details that continue to reoccur that have bigger meanings on character development from other movies. That's some of my favorite moments, is just like, when you're sitting with friends and they've seen it and they pick up on that as well. They're like, oh, that tiny either piece of dialogue or small visual detail that is immediately strung back to 3 or 4 movies ago that means this. It's like, dude, it's all of these tiny things that make the commitment to the MCU really just kind of worth it, because you're like, oh, I understand that because I sat through 18 movies and I know what that means and why it's important, et cetera, et cetera. But speaking of things that string together, that's not even trying to be a pun. The multiverse is open, WavePunk. The multiverse is completely shattered, and this came from the end, and this is a debate we will talk about. This came from the end of Loki, but now is officially confirmed. Spider-Man No Way Home trailer just dropped. Give me your initial thoughts, and I know that you have an interesting way you approach new trailers for MCU. Talk to me about that.
We could do a whole episode on the. I feel like we maybe even for this first episode should have done talking about like WandaVision and Loki, and like we thought those were just going to be filler content, nice stuff to help us just kind of like tide us over. And like, no, these are plot changing, like pivotal stuff. If you didn't watch Loki, the whole next arc's going to be super confusing. Go watch Loki if you haven't seen it. It's a great show. But yes, the doors are blown wide open.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, in reference to what you're talking about with the trailers, I wasn't going to watch the trailer, because here's my thing with movies. With the vast majority of the films, of the Marvel films, and just all films in general, I've only seen it one time. All of them, I only watched them once. Because I pay a lot of attention. I sit there just glued to the screen. I absorb it all, and I could usually, after one film, like if we went to dinner afterwards, I could sit there and just give you the play-by-play of the entire movie.
Sure.
But the reason why it's not a pretentious, I can watch movies one time and retain it all sort of thing.
That's impressive, dude. I mean, if you could do that, all power to you. That's impressive. Like,
but it was a thing. I think it was a technique I developed because every time I would watch a movie a second time, I would see it as a movie. I would see the camera cut. I would see the characters as actors. You would see the CGI. A lot of the illusion, a lot of the suspension of disbelief was broken for me the second time I watched films. And it's actually it's a weird thing with me that it's been long enough with me now. It's been like, you know, like over a decade for some films that now I've kind of forgotten stuff. So I'm kind of excited. Like I'm entering this new phase of life where I can go back and rewatch a lot of movies. But yes, so because of that, I don't watch trailers because they give me plot points to be looking for. If I know I'm gonna watch a movie like the new Spider-Man, absolutely positive I'm gonna go watch that. I'm excited to go watch that. Didn't watch. I was intentionally gonna avoid the trailer up until the moment where like, hey, let's do a podcast. And we gotta
I broke the spell. I broke the curse. I made him do it. So yeah.
I'll be fine. So I watched it. I watched it last night, and my thing, one thing I really loved was seeing immediately Doctor Strange is going to be a huge part of this film, because this was my first thought. The moment we start messing with the timeline, the Time Lord has to be a part of everything. Like Doctor Strange is going to be a ubiquitous character across everything. And it's actually really interesting. When we were watching Loki with me and my roommate watched it together. The very first episode, Loki's mind is blown. Right, he has no idea that the timeline people,
the timekeepers, the TVA.
TVA.
Yep.
TVA. Yeah. He had no idea the TVA existed. And we're like, this is a super powerful people. You're a god. How did you not know that this existed?
Yep.
And we sat there and we were like, okay, so which characters do know? We're like there's got to be a character we already have met who knows the TVA exists, right? That's just got to be a thing. And obviously we're like Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is the only character that makes any sense to have already been aware of this.
Yeah.
Really interesting to see in this trailer. It seems like he didn't. It seems like he's not aware of what's going on, which is going to be wild to see. But as timelines get mixed up, Doctor Strange is going to be a super important part of every story.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see what happens with that. So, but yeah, I was with the way that they're like, hey, we messed with all the timeline stuff. We got to reset it. My question is, did they mess it up, or is this just the point in the story where where Loki kills, where Sylvia kills the timekeeper, and then all of a sudden everything's blown open, and they're like, oh, it's our fault because we were just happened to be, I pressed the button on my car keys and that car honked over there. Did I do that? No. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
No, no. This is a really, I think this is a conversation specific, like a talking point for the trailer that a lot of people were exchanging their ideas, because a lot are unaware of, where does this take place? Does the split in the part of the trailer take place before or after Loki? And I think we'll get into that in a minute. But this sets up a lot. And for Doctor Strange, I wonder if his situation is kind of like, okay, he is either aware of the TVA's existence and he doesn't either talk about it or let people know about it, because it's very much I can't tell you, Tony, but I'll hold up on number one, so this is your only shot to get it done type of endgame moment. Or is he unaware of it and now will become aware because of what's happening? Surely he needs to be in the know somehow, because it seems like what Marvel's doing is they're setting up a path towards, if we talk about like Secret Wars or the Illuminati in Marvel, which is, for those who are unaware, the Illuminati basically consists of the 6 most powerful beings taking control of the Infinity Stones. So you got like Doctor Strange, Tony Stark, Black Panther, Black Bolt, Mr. Fantastic. They all are in control of a known stone. But even then, I mean, that is a storyline that's very, very fragmented. But it gets to a point where it's like, okay, this story for No Way Home has to take place. Do you remember the moment in the end of the Loki finale when Kang is sitting in the chair and he's basically divulging his plan, and then he like stops, takes a breath, and says, "We've crossed the threshold"? I think that's where we're at. Yeah. I think that what we're seeing is what we saw in the end of a lot of movies before Endgame, when we saw, okay, this is when the snap happened in their version. So like Ant-Man was in the quantum realm, the snap happened, we're seeing it line up. I think when WandaVision ended, when she found her kids in the post-credit scene and she was doing all her mystical stuff, between that and then Peter going to Doctor Strange and saying, hey, I want people to forget, those two moments are at the same time. And then that's when the threshold crossed and Kang was like, hey, something crazy just happened. Now here's your choice. You can either fix this or you can do whatever you want. Sylvie said, we're going to do whatever we want. And now everything is completely open. So I think that's where this story is sitting, is that we are seeing multiple stories stacked on top of each other. And it's happening as the multiverse opens. And now it's chaotic, which is, who knows at that point. But
yeah, no, for sure. And the chaos and stuff like that. And I love how like Marvel blows so many things open, but also they're very dedicated to not having there be like loopholes or having there be like, and then they just conveniently showed up here.
Yeah.
Like, how'd they get out of that prison? Like,
Yeah.
just skip that scene. Trust me, they escaped. Like, they're pretty good about that stuff. Like, there was the moment where Peter's chained to or handcuffed to the cop table, and he's like, I didn't kill Mysterio, and they're like, that the drones did. They're like, they're your drones, and it's like, goodness. How is he going to explain that? Like, that is a really complicated situation.
Yep.
Because yes, they're right. They are his drones. How is he going to be like, oh, I blocked a drone that was trying to kill me. It spun around and just happened to shoot him when he produced a video that seems real that incriminates Peter, right? Like, I love that they're like they're letting complicated things be complicated and nuanced while also saying, hey, we're gonna blow every door open and some things are just not gonna matter because time is what is time? Where is everybody going? Like, I love moments like that.
Yeah, they're tackling a lot of the consequences of actions, which is something the MCU does really well, and I appreciate them doing that because movies will very clearly create the viewer amnesia where it's like, oh, just forget that happened, don't worry about it. Where, quick side note, look at the Eternals trailer, which I know you probably haven't seen yet, but in that they reference Thanos and they're like, look, Thanos wiped away half. Thanos is an Eternal. He's like a family member of the Eternals. He's like their cousin. So the fact that they're still referencing, hey, this really crazy genocidal maniac wiped out half of organic life, that's still a factor that's being felt, and that they're referencing in Spider-Man. They're like, hey, your drones killed people. He's like, but it wasn't me, it was Mysterio. It's the same conversation they had in the Sokovia Accords. We're like, hey, we appreciate you saved New York, but Hulk jumping onto buildings killed people below, and it wiped out families. Like, you saved us, but that's an issue. You can't be wiping out civilians. This is a common theme that the MCU addresses really nicely. The constant state of consequences for the superheroes' involvement is really, really nicely done, and I appreciate the MCU continually doing that. And in that scene, hopefully, that was Charlie Cox's arm, aka Daredevil. Fantastic show. We hope comes back. But if Daredevil's in it, we know that means the opportunity for more characters to be in this entire movie is probably going to be the case. Now, there's been a lot of misdirects and cuts in that trailer. I know a lot of people are wondering, are there stand-ins? Are there green screens happening? Obviously, there's going to be. I think one of the biggest things I noticed was every time the Iron Spider suit showed up, it looked out of place. It didn't look like it was fully finished, and I wonder if that means they were taking out Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire and putting in Tom Holland in that place just to say, hey, it's a little bit of a misdirect like what they did with the Infinity War trailer. Sure. But I think that this movie has potential to really put us at that next stepping point because, what did we talk about 15 years ago? Oh, there's no way they can get a whole team of 6 superheroes in a movie. Oh, there's no way we can do this or that. And now we've passed that, and now we're to a point where like, oh, there's no way they can bring back Hugh Jackman. There's no way they can bring back Tobey Maguire. Look what they might be doing. They might be bringing these people in. So kind of watching the trailer, what were your like biggest takeaways or things that you saw that are hopeful for the future?
The biggest thing, for me, was this really interesting moment. This interesting thought that hit me. I'm going to describe a character to you, and you have to tell me which character I'm describing.
Okay.
They're a extremely wealthy, very intelligent, very good at doing a highly technical, very fine-tuned job. They're a smart aleck. A lot of people think that they're jerks, but they kind of just fly by the seat of their pants and do whatever they want, but also get things done. Also have a pretty strong moral ground. Which character is that? Is
this character still alive?
It may not important.
Oh, I mean, I'm thinking immediately of Tony Stark, but I feel like that's wrong.
Tony Stark.
Oh,
right?
Tony Stark. Okay.
I'm describing Doctor Strange. And think about this guy. He was a super wealthy neurosurgeon, very technical, very smart, very witty, just kind of like whatever. Like they're super similar characters. And now we're seeing Peter, who is becoming the new Iron Man, like he's taking that Tony Stark role, but he's still a kid. He is still a kid. And I could see so easily Doctor Strange kind of filling this void that was left by Tony Stark, seeing that relationship coming into hands. The question is obviously, does Doctor Strange reciprocate that energy?
Sure.
But I loved the little bit of dynamic between the two of them. The fact that he's like, can you do this spell? And the other wizard's like, don't cast a spell. And he's like, I won't. And then winks at him, right? That's like, yeah, fuck, of course I'm gonna try it. I wanna mess around. Like that's Tony Stark, finding a way to go back in time or inventing a new element, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly the sort of energy that Doctor Strange has to me.
That is so. I'm really glad you brought that up because it's something that's so obvious that I never picked that up. It's so true, and a lot of people were like, "Why would Strange even consider casting that spell? He should know better. He's the one who basically said, "I will sacrifice everyone to protect his own." People don't remember that Strange is a selfish ass. He is a incredibly smart doctor, but whether you want to look at the movies or the comics, Strange is selfish. He's incredibly intelligent. Even though he's the Sorcerer Supreme, he does what he thinks is best or what he wants to. Strange is a selfish character. He always been. So yeah, that is a dynamic that they absolutely could play with. Maybe Strange is helping Peter for some greater cause. A lot of people have been saying, "Oh, does this mean we're going to get to a point where Strange is trying to get ahead of some events? Does Strange realize the multiverse is opening, so he's trying to take out villains quickly so it doesn't happen?" I think that possibly, maybe, but I feel like Strange, there's some motive here. It just can't be Strange is helping Peter. There has to be some motive for Strange to be like, okay, I'm going to erase everyone's minds. Also, I'm going to tap in to the multiverse, which he says we don't know that whole lot about, because this movie's going to tie into Doctor Strange too. It's going to lead into him having to deal with Wanda. It has to. So I wonder what Strange's motive is going to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm also really still that big question of, does he know that the TVA exists? Is he aware that like, as the Time Lord, is he aware that there's people manipulating things and he's like, nothing I can do about them, they're super strong, they're up there, fine, you know what? Or he sees Kang's perspective. He's like, yeah, no, we need that, otherwise things would be crazy, right? And is he gonna at some point like run into Loki and be like, what do you mean you took down the TVA? Excuse me? Like, like that would be a crazy scene. Yeah, I don't know. I just realized they both, Iron Man and Doctor Strange, also have a piece of outerwear that is red colored that helps them fly. Just
yeah,
it's weird.
That's why that's why they clash personalities every time they were on screen together. But
exactly,
that's the thing. We're getting into territories now where any character, any scenario, any storyline can be made because of the multiverse existing. And again, to get to a point where you would have a multiverse, if we were talking 15 years ago, it'd be like, oh, multiverse, that's just, we're just basically writing over any plausible explanation. Oh, it's just, it's a cop-out. You write yourself into a corner, so you say multiverse. No, we're at a point where they have set this up so nicely to where the multiverse is not looked at as a cop-out for moments or motivations. It's looked at as an opportunity to bring in, obviously, new personnel, new storylines. And now, looking at kind of how the trailer concluded, Peter Parker is in an interesting spot. Peter is definitely not doing well. If we had to have a check-in, he's not okay. Yeah. Mondays suck. Yeah. I appreciate that this is addressing the ramifications of people knowing his identity, because that was a huge thing. How are they going to tackle it after Far From Home? And one of the big criticisms, I think, for the majority of Tom Holland's run so far is it's hard to be his character because he's so young. But a lot of people are saying, oh, he's Iron Man Jr. He hasn't had that emotional moment. He hasn't carried yet. I disagree with that, but I also understand kind of what they're saying. I mean, Homecoming, I thought, was a fantastic movie. I thought it was a great Spider-Man movie. I appreciated that the moments we got with Tom Holland having to carry a lot of the movie just as Spider-Man was really well done. But this is an opportunity for his character to really take that next step and kind of take ownership of, this is his playground, this is his world, because it's hard for him because everybody compares him to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man because there was no one else around. He had to carry that emotional baggage, and it was a mature story. The dude's like 30 when he played the role. But Tom Holland kind of getting into this spot, I think that this is a really, really fun opportunity to kind of cement him as the Spider-Man across the board.
I agree. I do think that there's a chance of that. I do think that, like, Spider-Man becoming the next Iron Man, like we're like taking over Tony Stark's kind of, I am the team captain of all of the superheroes, and like, this is my world. Like, Iron Man was kind of like the champion of Earth, in many ways. And for Spider-Man to become that, I think that maybe if Sylvia hadn't killed Kang, there's a chance that happens. But the moment this was the one issue I had with Endgame, and this is actually an issue I'm kind of excited that Marvel hasn't lost me yet on this, because time manipulation always fucks with me. It always makes things really difficult for me to follow and to know how. Like it's just, there always feels like there's inconsistencies, and Endgame wasn't an exception. I just kind of suspended my frustration with that because I was excited to see the end of the story, and the story was still exciting. The fact that the issue, the great problem was that Thanos killed half the universe. That is a heavy thing to deal with. And then the moment you imply there's millions of other universes, all of a sudden the half the universe that disappeared, it feels less important to me, right? I've never met half the universe, so I don't care about those people. I only care about it because it feels like such a substantial weight of loss. The moment you blow the doors open like that, it cheapens that the how much that crime is hurt. You know, thinking about like Thanos in Endgame from another universe, from another timeline, comes into this timeline, and they kill him in this timeline, so that timeline never has to deal with Thanos. Like, there's just like I was frustrated by that, and I was like, we're gonna have a problem with future movies of how do I make anything feel like anything matters. The whole like the universes at stake like argument doesn't matter to me anymore because there's a million universes. The way that Rick and Morty is like what matters if everything is just infinite,
right?
And so the only thing that really can matter is that the infinity is at risk, right? So the idea that all of the timelines convoluting and coming in on each other is going to cause war amongst the timelines, and is going to cause possible just a cataclysmic event that could literally end all of everything. That's sort of the only thing that I feel like is left, and it seems that we're heading that way with cities falling in on each other, and just like, oh yeah, tons of, like, if human life no longer important, all the like existence is what's on the line here. And I think the story of, is Peter Parker going to become the next Iron Man, it becomes a little bit lost in the middle there. He's just a kid in a spider suit and just trying to hang on through the clashing of timelines. You know?
Yeah. Look, Peter is like the last lineage of the human perspective right now in the MCU. Like every superhero that has died or passed on, and I don't want to say like spoilers, but like if you haven't seen Endgame by now, I'm sorry. We're talking about the Captain America's retired. He's old. He's in the retirement home. Loki's still around, but not really a superhero. But like, you know, Thor is off doing his own thing with Star-Lord. They're probably doing some galactic conquest stuff, but Tony Stark's dead. Bruce Banner is kind of crippled at the moment. We'll see what happens with him, which we'll get into what I kind of hope happens with like the what if storylines with him. But Peter Parker is like he's a kid right now in an adult universe, and he's trying his best just to be the neighborhood kid. And so I'd love for moments for him to kind of shed that title of being the apprentice to Tony and Doctor Strange, and maybe go back to being kind of the boots on the ground, the roots kind of kid, make my own suit. I'm going to handle things where I can. But it is an interesting perspective because Peter is now in a world where he can no longer make a decision. That was what Far From Home did really well. You know, when Fury was like, Peter, you got to make a decision. Are you going to be a superhero and help us? Or are you going to do your own thing? And he was forced to make a decision. Now he has no choice. He has to go with the nature of what's happening. So he's meeting people coming in like other villains from other universes. He's meeting the consequences of Mysterio, and the fact that now everyone knows who he is. He's meeting the consequences of dealing with Strange, and moving towards that. Now we have old villains coming back. We have, of course, Alfred Molina returning as Doc Ock, Willem Dafoe returning as Green Goblin. I am most excited for Green Goblin's return, and I'll talk about why, but seeing that those guys are coming back, did either give you a hope for other villains to make an appearance, or were you like as excited as we all seem to be with like, oh my God, these legends are back right now?
I am genuinely, I'm genuinely concerned about the film. I haven't even thought about like, are there gonna be like cool new villains or cool old villains returning and stuff like that? My thought, getting back to the very beginning of this episode where we talked about like part of what made Marvel so great is that I had no expectation for it. I didn't understand. I didn't have a comprehension of what they were trying to do. Yeah. So I just took it at face value, and it was great. We're having a Spider-Man movie. The fact that it's a Spider-Man movie is the first one we're doing this with is concerning, because we just had one of the greatest films of all time, Spider-Man, the Into the Spider-Verse.
Yep.
Which is a movie about Spider-Man's coming from different timelines and clashing with each other. It's a near perfect movie, and there will be, whether you like it or not, comparison.
Yep.
Between the two.
100%.
perfect movie that people had no expectations for, that blew those expectations out of the water, and because there were no expectations, it's like dividing by zero, like it's infinite. So then you're gonna come into this movie where you're taking Spider-Man characters that we already knew, right? This is the other part of it, is like, I didn't know who Peter Porker was. I didn't know who the Spider Girl, who's like Diva, with the bot, the Nicolas Cage character. I never met any of these Spider-Man before, because I'm not super into Spider-Man. I've read a lot of Spider-Man comic books. It's the only character I've read comic books of. Still never met any of these characters, and so I just take them at face value. I'm like, oh, this is super fun. Oh, these are weird. This one's zany. This is great. And then this movie, it's a live action version of kind of the same story that we just saw animated, which never goes well. We're seeing and also all of the Spider-Man characters we have already met, like that I have expectations about Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and Doc Ock as they existed, because I saw them. I remember them growing up with them, and they're going to have to do those characters justice. So to me, I'm concerned about this movie from like how will it be received, just like purely as a film, not as where it sits in the universe, but just as its own film in today's day and age. I'm concerned that this film has a lot of big hurdles to get over before to be like, this is a great film. I love it. It was so great,
Yeah. No, I think anyone who's just a fan of the character and just understands kind of the realm we're in now, like the expectations are these are expectations people had for Endgame. Like after Infinity War, because going into Infinity War, we knew Thanos was coming. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know how the story would go. People, when I say people, I'm usually meaning me, speculating about, oh, are they going to get stones? Are they going to get all of them? What's going to happen? How's this going to work? Then Endgame was basically, this needs to be the greatest superhero movie of all time to wrap this up. I think it almost got there. There are some things that it's like, oh, okay, like we're going back in time and it's basically just revisiting old places. That's fine. But I think Endgame was, especially with Into the Spider-Verse, about as close to like a perfect superhero movie as I'm probably going to see. But Spider-Man is such a staple character. Like, this is Marvel's A-list outside of Fantastic Four. This is their outside of Fantastic Four, X-Men. This is their A-list celebrity. This is their number one character. So this is such a huge movie, and it has to have those massive expectations because you're bringing in, you've introduced the multiverse, and obviously we're all excited for the fact that the Spider-Verse possibly is going to happen, but you're bringing in so many characters that we know and we love and we've seen, and it's immediately going to get compared to Into the Spider-Verse. And so, I hope, I'm sure they do, but, I hope that the people making it are like, okay, we know what the expectations are going to be for this thing, and even if we can't meet all of them, we have to treat this opportunity with as much respect as possible, because I don't want it to just be like, oh, it's a fun Spider-Man movie and we're just going on an adventure. I want it to like understand the scenario of multiverse being open, Loki has destroyed everything, and Peter Parker is in a spot he's never been in before, and this is now leading to Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Like, this is a massive movie for the MCU, and I very much hope that the people making it know that, and I'm sure they do. But dude, this is a huge movie, not just for the people in it, but the stakes. This is a huge movie.
Yeah, then they have to break the mold of, oh, superhero has supervillain that's threatening, kind of big thing, take out the supervillain. That formula does not work now, given what we know coming out of Loki. Do you think we're getting Miles Morales? Are we getting Into the Spider-Verse? I
think there's a chance. Looking at, again, this is me just looking at theory videos, when they first announced No Way Home, the outline of the word No Way Home was the shape of Puerto Rico, and people were like, oh my god, it's Miles Morales, it's got to be like, it's got to be that. I think that's a big hurdle to move. I think maybe like a post-credit scene with like the actor playing Miles might be cool, like hey, he's coming or something like that. But I don't know if this would be the movie to do it, because we are getting to a spot where having Peter alone is enough. Having Tom Holland as Spider-Man right now is enough Spider-Man, because he is still coming into the role. I think he's doing a great job. He's still coming into the role, and now you're introducing all these different elements, and this movie is pulling from various different comics. It's clear. Like, they're pulling from, which is notoriously known as one of the worst Spider-Man comics, but Marvel is very good at pulling bad storylines, making them good. They're pulling from One More Day, which is a story about Peter Parker going to Mephisto after Aunt May is shot, and he's like, hey, save her, and Mephisto's like, hey, no, and Peter Parker's like, I'll do whatever you want, just tell me. And he's like, okay, you've been married to Mary Jane Watson in the comic story for 65 years, how about I just take that? People hated that story. They're like, this is one of the worst Spider-Man stories. It came out like 12 years ago, it still has ramifications and problems in the current Spider-Man run. It's still creating problems, but they're pulling aspects of that. They're saying, instead of Mephisto, instead of making a deal with the devil, what if Peter goes to Mr. Strange and says, hey, help me? And instead of, losing your marriage or Aunt May, he's just like, hey, people are just going to forget you exist. It's also pulling from, I believe, a Spider-Man comic called Happy Birthday, which is a more recent issue, which is actually really, really good. It's a great run. But it's pulling from all these different facets. So I think that the fact that its plate is so full at the moment, I don't see how they introduce someone like Miles without planning it like they've planned the Loki moment, because Loki was planned 5 years ago. They knew how they were going to use Loki to set up everything. If you're going to pull Miles in there, I feel like with the fact that the multiverse exists, does that now give credibility to the Spider-Verse and all Sony properties? Because if it does, that means they now need to have a roadmap to how they connect the Spider-Verse cartoon to a live action movie of the Spider, of Miles Morales. Yeah. Like, I feel like that is where they're now focused on a roadmap. We're like, okay, in these next few years, we have to tackle how we connect this thing.
Yeah, I think you could see Miles Morales as a cartoon character in the movie.
Like, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, the way that Into the Spider-Verse, like, all the characters come from different styles of animation. Like, that, again, with that being, I think, the thing that people are going to be comparing it to, if people are coming in with a comparison, it's to that.
Sure.
That wouldn't be that jarring. And to answer your question of, like, does the fact that we're now kind of like blowing the timeline open us up to all Sony properties? I think in a similar way, I think most people are not going to be coming into this being like, oh, we can't see Venom because he's from the Sony universe, right? They're going to be like, most people are going to be like, oh, anything can happen. Well, wasn't Venom going to show up? Like if they're asking that question at all. So. Yeah. I do think that from the fans' perspective, the answer is yes. Obviously, from a legal perspective, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen there?
Yeah.
Who is while we're on the topic of Spider-Man, who's your favorite Spider-Man?
Ooh, no, that's a good question. I think that Tom Holland embraces the aspects of a young Peter Parker really well. I think that in terms of like quintessential comic book Spider-Man, he is the best. But over time, I look at Tobey's Spider-Man and I'm like, dude, it's the fact that it was I feel like those movies were very personal and very adult for what the topics they were tackling. Like Spider-Man 2 is about Peter Parker going through depression and anxiety and self-doubt and like just hating his life. And like Spider-Man has a saying that like part of being a superhero is being in pain. Like you have to embrace the pain to be a superhero. That is that whole movie. So like my favorite, I feel like the best Peter Parker, when I look at Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, when I'm looking at Spider-Man, I see Tobey Maguire, I see Peter Parker in the suit. When I look at Tom Holland's Spider-Man, I just see Spider-Man. So it's like I feel like I have a different connection with the old movies. Maybe it's just nostalgia glasses, but sure. I like the maturity of the old movies, so I gravitate towards that being my favorite. But I appreciate how comic accurate Tom Holland's Spider-Man is. I really do. Yeah. I think he does a great job. But same question to you. I mean, who are you picking?
Tom Holland is definitely he was like Tobey Maguire was, it's funny, right? Peter Parker's supposed to be the dorky nerd from school who's no one actually likes, then he gains powers, right? But we don't like looking at people who are too dorky. Like when we say the dork, we want it to be an adorable dork that we can all be sort of attracted to, right? We always draw those lines a little bit differently. And Tobey Maguire was almost a little too on the nose. Like it was like you're actually a dork, right?
Yes.
But in that way he was great, and Andrew Garfield was like, you're smoking hot. What are you talking?
You're skateboarding. You have good sarcasm. Like, dude, shut up.
Yeah, like you're not you are the most popular.
You're not that guy, pal.
No way. There's no way you're not the most popular kid in your school. Yeah. So yeah, Tom Holland, as far as that way goes, of mild-mannered Peter Parker, nails it. Right? Yeah. He's right there in the middle, and I love that he's the one we've got moving forward in the MCU. I did have Tobey Maguire to me was just all those movies were just like, oh, these are great superhero movies. I love it. I'm having a good time. Andrew Garfield, that run of Spider-Man was right around a really, really hard breakup in my life. And the second one is all about this will they, won't they, I love you, but I can't be with you. And then he finally chooses to be with her and she dies. And like that movie messed with my head. Dude. Like I was like for a while I was like I can't rewatch that. I can't. My brain kept being like I kind of want to rewatch it because I related to it so hard. And I was like I can't do that. I can't do that. So that movie was when you asked earlier, you're like, oh, Spider-Man 2, greatest Spider-Man movie. I was like, wait, which one? Because that second one was so powerful, just on such a personal level for me.
Yeah. No, I feel like it really depends on where you view these movies. Like if I was in end of middle school going into high school and I came up with Tom Holland Spider-Man, you got the the dorky kid who's trying to fit in, very classic high school vibes, and this little guy is taking on these huge problems, like his crush, his girlfriend, or the girl he's trying to go out with, her dad's the villain. He shows up on prom night and he's like, hey Peter, he's like, oh shit, like that's who I'm like. I'll be like, oh yeah, that's high school 100%, like, oh, but like I feel like it just depends on who you grew up with. That's the thing. Spider-Man is such a personal character that's why he was written the way he was. Stan Lee, what famous quote was like, we wrote him to be everybody because you go through a bad breakup, you relate to Andrew Garfield trying to save Gwen Stacy. I'm like, I have a bad week, put on Spider-Man 2. Peter Parker's going through some stuff, the dude is struggling. I'm like, I relate. Like it just really depends on where you go. And I think that the one small thing that Tom's run doesn't have yet that I want to happen. I think that it would actually. I wonder what a movie would look like under Sam Raimi. I wonder if Sam Raimi would approach Tom Holland Spider-Man a little bit differently. But I want to see Tom and his Spider-Man go through that stuff. I want him to see. It sounds terrible to say, but I want to see him struggle because he's had when he's had to go through the emotional stuff. He's done. It's so good. I think his Spider-Man kicks it. But I want to see him have a movie where he's like by himself. He has to deal with the ramifications of trying to be a kid and a student and just go through high school or go to class and love and fight crime, and he needs to get beat up. When we look at the old movies, Toby took a punch. That dude got thrown through buildings, and that's the beauty of Spider-Man. It's like, dude, he can be thrown through the earth and he will get up and try again. Like he will just constantly. It's pain. Being Spider-Man is being in pain, and I want to see that. But this No Way Home movie, man, it is a huge moment because we have kind of coming to a head on the segment. We have old villains coming back, chat. So we look at Doc Ock coming back, which I don't know how that's gonna play, but my favorite one that's getting reintroduced is Green Goblin, because I think Green Goblin was a very, very underrated character in the first movie, and as a whole, he's one of the more personal Spider-Man villains. You look at killed Gwen Stacy, and then that whole fight and what Hobgoblin means. But Green Goblin and bringing Willem Dafoe back, I loved his character in the first movie, and I think that, I wouldn't be mad if they said, hey, we're going to pick one of these villains and make it maybe a long-running thing for Tom Holland Spider-Man to deal with. I think this is a really cool introduction. But
I do too. I am really excited to see what happens. It's going to be a movie full of special moments, full of Easter eggs. So like as long as they do enough to have it not be like this was just a shitty live action version of Into the Spider-Verse, I'm going to be happy with it. Yeah,
look, this is a branch movie. Like it has to stand on its own, but also we know it's not everything's going to be resolved here. It's going to get resolved in Doctor Strange 2. So I wonder if they're bringing Sony properties over to the MCU. If we go to Doctor Strange 2, will they be bringing over Fox properties, and could we see someone like Wolverine come back? Could we see anybody from the Fox universe that made their run, even Fantastic Four maybe? But again, this it's going to be a huge moment for the MCU. I think we can all agree we're really excited to see how it plays out. I don't want another trailer. I know people want it. I don't want it. I don't want to see any more. No. Just leave it. Don't show me Toby. Don't show me nothing. Let me go into the movie, see it myself. I'll be happy. That's all I give a crap about. Just keep us in the dark. But speaking of things that have changed, because the multiverse is open, and this again, we're in a moment of Marvel where like this is the transition period to Phase 4. We've had Loki create chaos. We've had WandaVision hint at chaos. Falcon and Winter Soldier was great, but had nothing to do with this stuff. Now we're getting into the multiverse, and one of the interesting new cartoons that has been released is, of course, What If? This is a storyline that runs in Marvel Comics that says, hey, your favorite character, your favorite storyline, what if we just tweaked it a little? How would it play out? What have been your impressions so far? We're 3 episodes deep. Last one came out 2 days ago. What are you thinking?
Okay, wait, which ones? Can we say what our favorite episode is on 3?
Yes.
You good? Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. 2.
Episode 2. Yes, 100%. Yes, 100%. Yes. Yes.
It's like the first one I saw was like, okay,
I enjoyed it. I was like, okay, yeah, okay.
It's a cool. It's like it's literally. But the thing was, like, it kind of like it started and then it deviated from the story I knew, and then it kind of closed back in kind of a similar place-ish. Like, I don't know, like
Sure.
it didn't feel like it was that big of a difference. And then episode 2 was like, what if the best like negotiator and nicest, most morally sound person who's also a badass fighter warrior got captured by pirates? Well, the pirates would become good people, you know? Like, it's great. And like just how there was my favorite moment of episode 2.
Yeah.
And this is as someone who loves world building. World building is shit. I love world building. When the moment where they're like, oh, it's the collector. The collector's the kingpin. And it's just the moment Thanos says, oh, when I stepped down, there was a vacuum and he filled it. I'm like, that's such a good detail that like you didn't have to address. Like, you could, like, again, the first episode doesn't have anything like that. There's no like, because of this change, these other things off screen also changed. I loved that show. That second episode made me so excited for the rest of them.
Dude, I have talked about this specific aspect so many times, but whenever I say I love the little details, that's what makes the whole experience. And yes, 100%. Like, the first episode, it was fun. Like, it was a nice introduction. Like, oh, what if Peggy became Captain Britain? Loved it. Thought it was, like, the action was great. I thought that the showing off, like, her powers and you know, just kind of getting people involved in the role was great. I liked that they brought Bradley Whitford in for the general. He's a great actor. But I appreciated the story. But yeah, it was like, okay, we kind of ended in a similar spot we've been before, but she's now out of time, so it's cool. I'm glad they didn't mess with Steve's character. If they had made Steve like an ass, or like made him like, oh, like, you know, how, like, oh, I'm nothing, like, bro, like, I'm glad they kept Steve the same. We appreciate that. But, you know, we'll talk about episode 3 later. But episode 2 was just, it started off with the premise. Okay, so we got Chadwick Boseman, his last role, by the way, which was really nicely done. I appreciate that they got him just in time before, you know, unfortunately he passed. But it was a really interesting concept. What if this small child from Wakanda, who was supposed to be Black Panther and King, was Star-Lord? And I didn't expect them to bring in Thanos. I didn't expect that at all. No. And the fact that he comes in, they said his name, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And he comes in, he was like, yeah, I was gonna wipe out everybody, but I decided not to. I'm like, wait, so what does this mean? Like, are you okay? Is everything all right? They're like, yeah, but you're still like a crazy ass person. He's like, sometimes. I'm like, hello? Like, is this okay?
He still thought it was a good idea. Like, like the whole thing was like, no, it's not genocide, I promise. Like, no, let's listen to me. It's just a fish shit, right? Like, what?
I was like,
so funny.
I was like, this is the guy who wiped out like multiple planets just before this. He didn't even get to the stones yet. He just started wiping out half it. Like, are we on the same page? But I loved. The Collector is such an awesome character. I love that they made him the focus. It was so cool to see.
Yeah, it was interesting how much younger he kind of like comes across in this episode than previously. Like in Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy, where we see him before, he's a lot more kind of like he doesn't look like the kind of guy that could take a fight, right? Yeah. He looks like the kind of guy that
looks like just a guy. Yeah, he's just like a guy who knows what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, but when he opens the vault and he's got all these weapons that you've seen, you know, that was pretty cool. Like, that was really fun. And yeah, the very beginning, was it the very beginning? It's right. It's one of the first few scenes of the episode where Star-Lord's going in to get the Infinity Stone. He like comes around, drop your weapons, and he's like, there might be another name you know me by, and he goes, Star-Lord, right? The guy who's like it's like that did such a good job of like setting the tone of, when T'Challa became Star-Lord, everything was different. Like, everything was different. Like, because people did actually know who he was and stuff like that. Like, that was the way that just everybody he comes in contact with becomes a better person. You know, that episode was so good, good.
I love that they every now and then in these episodes there's a shot of like the Watcher just watching. He's just observing what's happening. I love that small, like, because you see it's like it's very easy to miss, but when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, he by the way is narrating all this. He's the one who's seeing this, and you know that's a huge point of episode 2 was like, hey, T'Challa's making everybody better. Like, he is just, whether it's Yondu or it's his crew or Nebula or Thanos, who apparently is a good guy now. And I love that it's like that small unwritten tension in the room whenever Nebula and Thanos are talking, because her face is fine. She's not messed up yet. She hasn't been manipulated, and he was taken away from his path on the verge of going full Titan. So it's like they have this very quiet tension whenever they're talking to each other. He's like, hello, daughter, and she's like, father. And I'm like, you guys should hate each other, but you don't, and it's weird.
Yeah.
And then when he was getting attacked, and she's like, you can't hold him off, and she's like, are you crazy? He's like, no, I'm mad. I was like, yes, you are. That's 100%. Yes, 100% you are. Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Yeah. No, so many wonderful characters I just didn't expect to encounter. Like that was the thing.
Yeah.
It was okay, this is Guardians of the Galaxy. This is Yondu. This is T'Challa's Star-Lord. Okay, what are the Guardians of the Galaxy characters, right? And we didn't meet Groot or Rocket. We run into Drax as a bartender who's like, we must take a picture. You looked awful in that. Like,
my wife and kids would love this. I was like, you have your wife and kids because they didn't die. Yeah, this is great.
Thanos didn't do his shit. And but that was the other part of it. Like the whole like Thanos, Nebula, Children of Thanos being characters was just not expected at all. And like it was just wonderful. Like, what if we took chocolate and mango and put it together? And you're like, oh, okay. And like it just worked. It worked so well. The triple cross, like the whole like my brain kept going to the Rick and Morty job episode, the episode about heist movies. Like, oh, I know a guy for a job like that. They had very much that
quadruple
vibe of,
cross, and it's like, damn it, we knew it.
I knew all along that you knew all along that you knew all along. Like so that movie was that one was really fun. And it's gonna be interesting to see if they ever like take any of these episodes and go like let's do more with it.
I hope so.
I would love to watch that universe a little bit more. What did you think of episode 3 though? Because episode 3 I think was pretty tonally different than the other two, of like just not having characters swap places, but having characters just not exist anymore.
Right. I think that I enjoyed 99.9% of episode 3. The ending was what it needed to be, for sure, and it wrapped up with the conclusion of obviously Hank Pym being brought under custody for Asgard. But that is the type of storyline that I wish was continued, because What If is all about, in terms of the comics, it's like, hey, we're having a run about, we're going to start you here, we're going to take you on the journey, we're going to keep going, and then we'll probably end somewhere, right? And if you have a one shot like with Hulk's What If, when he becomes the Herald of Galactus, which by the way I hope they do, we'll talk about, but that's very much like, hey, this previous story happened, let's do a one shot if the Hulk became the Herald of Galactus and why that matters. This was like, I loved that it was kind of like a horror-esque vibe for episode 3. It was like, dude, these people are dropping everywhere you expect the Avengers moment to happen. They're getting taken out. We don't know why. The scariest moment in terms of like drama was when the Hulk died, and you're like, excuse me? Like, I loved the premise of it, but when it ended, I was like, I'm mad that this didn't continue, because this is such a weird and this is a very realistic concept for the MCU. What if the superheroes just died? What if they just all started getting wiped out one by one? What the hell do you do? And I'm kind of upset that it ended after one episode. But give me your thoughts on that whole episode as a whole.
I thought the end with Loki just in a single day taking over all of Earth was hilarious.
Cool. Yeah, that was cool. Yeah,
like, oh yeah, you all became subjugated very quickly. But I also like the interesting implication that Ant-Man and his powers, when applied properly, that he's just the most powerful Avenger. That he is capable of, in an instant, taking out all of the other Avengers was really fascinating. It's interesting to me. It felt a little inconsistent though.
Okay.
Like, how does Loki fight Hank Pym without knowing his powers well? And Thor just dies.
Yeah.
That didn't click with me.
Yeah, that is because I thought when they were showing the flashback, so immediately it was like, Fury's keeping up with Hank Pym, there's no chance. Like, I know Fury's talented, but there's no chance. So there's got to be something else here. So Loki is a god. He is very good at hand-to-hand combat, and he's the god of mischief. So I'm not doubting his ability to fight, but the only problem the MCU has had for 12, 13 years is that they underpower their heroes. We know that. They've underpowered a lot of their characters because they have to. You can't show the Hulk destroying an entire city and winning the entire battle in one fight. It's not going to happen. You can't show Thanos killing the Avengers in 3 seconds, because he would, and it can't happen. You can't show, the Avengers being uber powerful and Loki being able to best anyone because he can, because then it's not interesting. So I was like, okay, yeah, Loki, I'll give him a pass. He probably could maybe hand to hand, but still, even then, you're like, Hank Pym was going subatomic and he's still keeping up. I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah. But yeah, when we ended, I'm like, how did Thor take an arrow took an arrow to the knee, took an arrow to the chest and just died? And I was like, oh, maybe Hank like flew off the arrow right through like a bullet, like in Star Wars when they did like the light speed through the ships, and like it was like one small pebble takes out the matter. But no, it's an arrow. I'm like, wait a minute, can an arrow really take out Thor? Is that possible?
It could also be this is the point in Thor's life when he was the most powerless. He had been stripped of his power to some degree. So like, what part of his invincibility is inherent to his nature as a demigod, or is inherent to his power as a demigod? So there's a chance that one makes a little bit more sense. But still, it was also interesting. The one thing I didn't like about the third episode was we didn't see the pivotal moment that set off the chain of events, right? In the first one, we see Peggy realize, I have to jump in here because the guy didn't go up and leave his bomb in the upstairs room because everyone stayed downstairs to watch in the room. That changed things, right? Because beyond people pick up T'Challa, we saw that moment happen, and then everything else changed. In this, we didn't see the moment Hope dies and Hank Pym's heart breaks and he goes crazy, right? So there was kind of no way for us to really properly anticipate that he was going to be the bad guy. Even at the moment when he's looking over the grave, I'm like, who's about to show up? I don't know what this is, right? So that was my only complaint with episode.
This is 100%. This is very much an episode that relies solely on your ability to understand the MCU as a whole. Like if you've watched the MCU up until now, you would have no problem understanding this episode. But for someone new, they wouldn't be aware of Hope Van Dyne's role. They wouldn't be aware of the fact that her mom was stuck, or that she died on the mission, or that she was stuck in the quantum realm. Like they wouldn't know that. So like, we saw Ant-Man 2, so we know that information, why Hank is upset, but no one else would if they've never seen that movie.
And I very much, I did not remember what Hank's wife's name was, because again, she's in one movie.
I forgot her name too. Yeah,
she's referenced a few times. So I'm like, who's Hope? I don't remember this character. And there was an interesting moment. I kind of enjoyed the fact that there was a point where Widow's getting beat up, and me and my roommates sat there and were like, who's invisible? Like, what character goes invisible? I can't think of a Marvel character we've met yet who goes invisible, but Ant-Man functionally does by going small, right? It's like he's so that was kind of a fun payoff of like, oh yeah, right, no, that is who that would be. Okay. But still, I would have appreciated some like reference at the beginning to that moment that would help kind of like solidify that there would be an arc there rather than just kind of a twist at the end, I guess. Yeah,
and I'm mad that this was only one episode, because I liked the episode, but this was an opportunity to, and again, they couldn't do it with every episode being its own thing, but this is a storyline that is incredibly interesting, because again, you think about Ant-Man, or you think about that power, it's like, oh, he's Ant-Man, he can go big, and that's it. But like, no, like this is the same thing as if we look at, I'm going to just pull from here. If we look at like the Flashpoint storyline, when humanity basically had Captain Atom, or Mr. Atom, I forget his name, but they basically said, hey, we're going to wipe out humanity because Mr. Atom can go nuclear. We're just going to do it. Like there are moments in alternate universe storylines where it's like horror becomes a big play, and like, oh my God, we can do this and we can be evil people. Like we forget that he can go subatomic and kill people. We forget that he can just jump into your skin and blow you up. We can forget that he can take out the Hulk. Like in all of Marvel, Ant-Man might be one of the most dangerous characters, and again, we never talk about it, but like this is a storyline that I wish they went super in depth to, because what do you do if Hank Pym and his daughter Hope, because she kept saying it's Hope, I'm like, there's no way they're doing Hope Van Dyne, because again, that wasn't even really referenced in this episode. But I'm like, okay, so if Hope's the only connection here, if we're doing a series about angry Hank Pym with his wife being gone, stuck in the quantum realm, and his daughter being taken out on a mission from S.H.I.E.L.D., you realize this single guy could kill everyone. You understand that he could take out every single superhero, and he does that. And I wish that it kept going, but like, yeah, this is a storyline that I would like to see explored more. I'm sad that it wrapped up so quickly, but it is a part of Marvel that I wish they'd get into more, which is like the dark side of Marvel, like the really depressing, or like kind of the horror side, something that the DC does really well that I wish that Marvel would embrace a little bit more. But I thought the episode was pretty good, and like as a standoff, as a one-on-one, I thought it was pretty good. But looking kind of at the future, because I know we got like Doctor Strange coming, we got Spider-Man episode coming. I don't know what else they're going to attempt, but is there any specific character that you're looking at or a specific storyline you want to see for What If?
Oh, what? That's a great question I hadn't thought about. Also, Mustache pointing out Ghost in Ant-Man 2 does turn invisible.
Yes.
That's a good call.
But I was
weird
like,
that it's also an Ant-Man movie. But
yeah, but I was like, that's so obscure. Like, the only person who goes invisible is a villain who was alive for like 30 minutes. Like, there's no way they're gonna pull someone, right?
Yeah, who knows?
It could have been, yeah.
I do like the just piggybacking off what you said, that like Ant-Man, one of the fact that he could just kill everybody.
He was gonna go up Thanos' butt, and he didn't, and he just went up everybody else's. Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that he's the fact that he doesn't, because he's just these like super golden retriever of a character, you know. It's kind of fascinating. What ifs would I enjoy? Oh man, I think I would enjoy one thing I love is and My Hero Academia, the anime, does a good job of this, of like, what about powers where people decide, you know what, I don't want to be a superhero. I don't want to save people. I just want to do things. Like if what's a good character for this? So like someone who's into speed, right? Goes and has to get into racing or something, right? Like the. Sure. I'm having trouble. If Iron Man decided he didn't want to save the world, he decided to turn his tech to like become like, you know, the next Steve Jobs or something like that. I don't know. It's like things like that would be fascinating to me, just to see alternate timelines where they made different decisions away from hero work.
Oh, that is interesting. Like, you know, like what if the Flash was an Olympic sprinter instead of just like a superhero? Like, what if he was like, hey, I'm really fast and I'm just going to start, I want to be selfish and just win everything and like get glory and all stuff.
It'd be the Dash situation from Incredibles where he's like, I know I can win every race, but I have to go just fast enough. And then I feel like I'm just fast enough to win, but not fast enough to be unbelievable and to think that I'm doped up. So how do I ride this whole ground, blah, blah, blah. Like that'd be fascinating. So.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's, again, I like that idea of like, you know, real people with powers. Like, do I save people, take on that responsibility, or do I just say, hey, I want to do cool stuff because I can? It'd be funny. We get to a point where it's like, you know, superheroes, you save someone, all right, and they're like, all right, Venmo me like $13.50. I saved you for the day. Just give me a little kickback. But yeah, like the What If series is, I'm glad that Marvel's doing it because again, we're getting to that point where everything ties in. It all ties into the multiverse, and now they're really embracing it. They're embracing the fact that hey, everything is crazy, and we're just gonna kind of rock with these storylines. I'd love to see, and I told you this a billion times, and I've said it to YouTube and Twitter, I'd love to see a couple of stories for What If. Number one, I would love to see a iteration of two different Hulks. The Hulk story of the end is really great. It's a story about Bruce Banner being the last man on Earth. Humanity has nuked itself out of existence, and he is alive, and him and the Hulk are basically fighting for the right to exist. And it's about being isolated, being alone, and then, you know, fighting against these insects that have been kind of mutated due to the radiation, and how he lives his days, just basically scourging the earth, finding what he can to survive, and then in the end, Bruce Banner and Hulk have a rectification of who gets to exist. Banner eventually dies, Hulk takes over, and he's Hulk forever, and he just sits alone in the dark. And it's like, it's a really good story. I would love to see, because the Old Man Hulk, like Old Man Logan, all those stories are great. The second one is when Hulk becomes Herald of Galactus. This is a huge story that I hope they tackle, because it is, I think if they want to keep the Hulk alive in the MCU, this is where they have to go. So they kind of meddled with this when they put Hulk on Sakaar. They were like, hey, we're going to take the World War Hulk storyline from when originally the big minds on Earth, you look at Mr. Fantastic, you look at Iron Man, all the Avengers were like, hey, Hulk is too dangerous. He can go crazy and destroy the Earth. Let's send him away. So what they do is they send him into space. They basically trick him. They send him into space, and he flies off. He lands in the wormhole, goes to Sakaar. He rules Sakaar for a long-ass time. He has a wife and child, and then they eventually die. They get blown up. He comes back to Earth, and if I remember correctly, it's like the Avengers go to get him. They accidentally kill his wife and daughter. He gets pissed. He goes back to Earth and just wipes out every single person. Like, he wipes out all the Avengers. He goes absolutely unreal. And in the end, that whole storyline comes to a head with him fighting Sentry and him having to calm down. But the one shot of that was called What If Hulk Becomes Herald of Galactus. So this follows that same storyline, and in here Hulk basically, instead of losing to Sentry, he defeats Sentry, he survives, and he is essentially now on Earth, and he's like, hey, I've wiped out everybody, I'm sorry, let's try to make amends. And instead of that happening, they come together with the last remaining Avengers. They're like, okay, here's the situation. Skrulls are on Earth. They are completely taking over. They have killed basically everybody. We need your help. Hulk does what he can, and Skrulls basically activate a weapon, which is Ant-Man, Hank Pym. They activate Hank Pym as like a nuclear bomb, so he grows big and then explodes, wipes out everything. Hulk's last alive, and Hulk is like, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? There's nothing to do, and the Skrulls are still winning. So he calls Galactus, not Galactus, he calls Silver Surfer. Surfer comes down. He makes one call. He calls Silver Surfer. He comes down, and Surfer's like, Hulk, what do you want? Like, you've made a call. You don't do that unless you're desperate. Hulk's like, please kill me. Please just end it all. Wipe out Earth. Call Galactus. Tell him to come eat Earth. Kill me. I don't want to do this anymore. And Silver Surfer's like, I'm not going to do that. Hulk basically chokes him out. It's like, you're going to do it. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to do it. So Galactus comes anyway, and Galactus is basically like, well, you're the last person on Earth, and I think that means you should have the right to choose because you're the last one. And Galactus is like, instead of killing you, I will and make you my Herald. So you're going to travel around instead of Silver Surfer, and you're going to be the one who finds me worlds and takes over. So that whole idea of just Hulk going through crazy stuff and then becoming the right-hand man to Galactus is a storyline I'd like to see. I think it would be really, really fun. And I think if they want to keep Hulk alive, it'd be important.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think I do think we need more information on Hulk before they can do it in this show.
Yeah,
like
100%.
That's a lot of new characters to all meet at the same time.
Yeah.
But I do think I do like the idea of like doing something specifically with Hulk. He is, while one of the most important characters in the show, he's one of the least developed characters in the show. I would love more out of him. Just an idea that crossed my head is what if Captain Marvel, if the planet she's on, I forget what it's called, that she grows up on, what if they were just honest with her from the beginning about who she was and what she could do?
Yeah, you're a human. Sorry.
You're a human, and also you got this like crazy stuff going on, and we're not going to inhibit you anymore. We're just going to like let you, and like she just becomes like on their side. Like what happens with the universe?
Wow.
That has that power instead of Earth.
That is actually a really interesting concept because I mean, you know, aside from my personal feelings for that movie, and like, you know, it's just you either like it or you don't. I liked that concept of, you know, they're not telling her what's going on and she's trying to figure it out. But yeah, what do you do if they're just like, hey, by the way, you're a human and you got some weird ass powers. We gave you amnesia. Sorry you hit your head, but here's everything you need to know, and would really be awesome if you could help us out. And if she does she even answer the call when Fury answered? Probably not. She probably doesn't even go there. Yeah, she doesn't answer the call. So Earth just dies.
Yeah. She wouldn't. Yeah, she wouldn't have even necessarily been on Earth. Yeah, nope. They would take over. What if? Oh, I love this. That's what the show's called. What if Guardians of the Galaxy Don't Stop Ronin? We get Ronin versus Thanos.
Wow.
Like that fight would be sick, right?
Yeah, because
that fight was pretty sick.
Because Ronin was going for Thanos right at the end. He's like, "Hey, I'm taking the stone. I'm gonna take over."
He's gonna destroy Xandar, and then he's coming for Thanos. Quill doesn't catch it. It touches the planet. Planet's gone. Guardians of the Galaxy dead. Ronan's like, all right, round 2, let's go.
I feel like you could even make one. It's like, what if Star-Lord didn't get in his own way and beat up Thanos in Infinity War? What if he got the gauntlet off? Like, it's like a 30-second episode. Gauntlet's off. We end it all. Boom, done. Like,
it's weird how Peter Quill is the center of all of this.
Peter Quill is the problem.
Galactic shit.
Now he works at Dairy Queen. He's the only problem. But yeah, and the only other storyline, which again I kind of go to the characters I like a lot. So like I like when they do stuff with the Hulk. I feel like he's been underutilized so far because, I mean, what do you do with him other than giving him like a solo movie series? But Thanos is another interesting character that you absolutely should take advantage of because, one, we're not seeing the end of him. He's coming back, whether it's Celestials or, sorry, when we see him in the Eternals, which we know he's probably going to be in the future. Thanos as a character can exist in the multiverse, and he's such a unique character because there is a story called Thanos Wins where he does just that. He kills all the Marvel characters. He wins. He gets to basically travel around the galaxy, and his younger self takes over the Kree homeworld, and they're like, you're our master now. And then all of a sudden Cosmic Ghost Rider shows up and it's like, hey, I've come to get you. They drag young Thanos and they bring him to a world that he's never been to before, and in front of his older self. And his older self is like, hey, I need your help because you may think you're going to kill everybody, and you do, but there's one person you haven't killed, and I need your help to kill him. And young Thanos is like, are you sure? And it's this crazy story of young Thanos and old Thanos joining forces to take down Galactus. Silver Surfer, Cosmic Ghost Rider is Punisher, so it's like this crazy thing. Hulk's in chains, and in the end, Thanos fights himself for the right to be the ultimate ruler. It's these wild story. If you've never read it, highly recommend you read it. It's probably one of the best Thanos stories out there. But again, that's kind of the beauty, Caleb, of the multiverse. It's like anything we want to happen, any storyline, you've always said, hey, it'd be really cool if we saw that. You can do it now. It's just whether or not they're going to make it. Like, they can literally do anything. So I want to see that. But
I do too. I do. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm just excited to see what else we get within this show. So though I love that it's weekly. I love that it's not like, all right, what if's out here, go binge watch it. Nope, got a one a week. Much better way to consume content. Yeah,
I'm very glad that, especially with the format of this show, with just a podcast that wants to talk weekly. I'm very glad that they're just keeping us. They're keeping us coming back. Yeah, listen, the Loki just wrapped, and that led right into this. So we hope that you guys have enjoyed this small conversation. We've covered a lot of topics. We talked about our introductions to Marvel, how the MCU's kind of affected a lot of people's lives, and how the bridge between old Marvel Silver Age and now the new movies have come into fruition. Then we covered the No Way Home trailer. We talked about the fact that the multiverse is open, what we're excited to see, what we're worried about, but more just hoping the movie gets right.